Just like everyone has a past, so does every place, and each one comes with its own set of stories. Now imagine if some of those stories were so eerie that just hearing about them could make your skin crawl. Let's take a look at 10 events from the Wild West that might be new to you and are guaranteed to give you the chills.
There is nothing to fear, you cowards. Time to die, Sheriff.
Charles Kennedy. In the wilds of Eagle Nest, New Mexico, there lived a man named Charles Kennedy. He was a towering figure with a wild beard and a sharp look in his eyes, setting him apart in the Merino Valley not as a simple settler, but as something more menacing. In 1865, Charles, his wife Rosa of Ute Indian descent, and their son ran an inn that seemed like a safe spot for travelers in the Palo Flechado Pass. But this inn was far from safe. It was a trap where Charles preyed on unsuspecting guests. The way Charles operated was chillingly straightforward. Guests would vanish, swallowed by the wilderness, with Charles robbing them and then making sure they left no trace behind. The horrifying truth came to light when Rosa, seeking escape from her dreadful life, shared their dark secrets with the people at John Pearson's saloon, a gathering place for many of the area's tough characters. Rosa told a heartbreaking story of witnessing Charles's cruelty not just to a traveler, but to their own son as well, driven by a drunken rage and a careless word from the boy. She managed to flee, setting off a chain of events that led to Charles's downfall. The story enraged Clay Allison, a man known for embodying the untamed spirit of the West. Allison gathered a group to deal with Charles. What they found at the Kennedy home confirmed the brutal tales, evidence of numerous victims. This led to Charles being arrested, but fears he might escape led Allison and his group to take drastic action. They dragged Charles through the streets of Eagle Nest, ending his life as a form of frontier justice. He was buried outside of sacred ground, a stark note of what he had done. Plat River Ship of Death. Walking by the Plat River in autumn, you might feel a chill that's not just from the cold air. There's a story here that's part of the local legends about a ghostly ship that appears out of the mist. This ship looks old and worn, with frost on its sails and a crew of ghosts going about their tasks as if they were still alive. The story goes that this ship appears from nowhere, made entirely of fog and ice. When the ghost crew stops and stares at one spot on the ship, a ghostly figure appears, and this is where it gets spooky. This figure looks like someone the person watching knows, and it's said to be a sign that someone close to them is going to pass away soon. People have been telling stories about seeing this ship since 1862, and every story ends with someone's death. The origin of the ship is a mystery, but everyone who's seen it tells the same eerie tale. The first person who claimed to see it was Leon Weber, who was out hunting near the river. Suddenly, he found himself surrounded by a thick fog, and out of that fog, he saw the ship, clear as day, with a ghostly crew who all stopped to stare at him. Then they made space for him to see something terrible, a vision of his loved one, lifeless on the ship's deck. As soon as he saw it, the ship vanished, leaving him alone with a cold silence. When he got back home, he found out his fiancée had passed away, making her the first of many people said to be claimed by the sight of the death ship on the Plat River. The Headless Horsemen. Back in the wild days of 19th century Texas, where chaos often ruled and dangers lurked, a group of fearless lawmen known as the Texas Rangers stood firm. They were the shield against turmoil, patrolling the vast lands between the Rio Grande and the Nueces River. This was a time and place shaped by the Mexican-American War in 1846, which decided the Rio Grande as the border. Yet, The real work of making the land safer from thieves and troublemakers fell to the Rangers. Among these legendary figures were Creed Taylor and William Alexander Anderson Bigfoot Wallace. Their famous encounter with the horse thief Vidal in 1850 is a story many remember. At a time when settlers faced attacks, Vidal made the bold move to steal horses, including some prized Mustangs from Taylor's own herd. Unwilling to let this go, Taylor, Wallace, and Flores, another rancher, tracked Vidal down, leading to a showdown under the cover of night. Frustrated with the usual ways of dealing with such crimes, they took a drastic step after dealing with Vidal and his gang. Wallace took Vidal's head off, placing his body on a wild Mustang, with his head and hat fixed in a terrifying pose on the saddle. This chilling scene gave rise to the legend of El Muerto, the Headless Horseman haunting South Texas. Even though many were skeptical, the tale of Vidal didn't end with his death. Ranchers eventually caught the horse, revealing Vidal's fate. He was buried near Ben Bolt, Texas, but stories of El Muerto didn't stop. Sightings of the headless rider continued, reported by soldiers and travelers, with the last whisper of him seen near Freer, Texas, in 1969. Haunted Farm. In Kearney, Missouri, you'll find the Jesse James Farm, a place with a story marked by conflict and defiance. This farm was the childhood home of Jesse James, one of the most talked-about outlaws in American history, and his brother Frank. The place is filled with tales from a turbulent past, making it a hotspot for ghost stories. Their mother, Zerelda, was a tough woman who survived 3 husbands and raised 8 children. Jesse and Frank grew up during the tough times of the Civil War, facing violence right at their doorstep. The farm itself saw Jesse being attacked by Union soldiers, the cruel loss of his stepfather, and their land being set on fire. The farm's history got even darker when detectives aiming to capture Jesse attacked the house. This attack led to the tragic death of Jesse's young half-brother Archie and left Zerelda with severe injuries. Jesse was buried here for a while by his mother, who wanted to keep him safe from those who might disturb his grave. For over a century, people have said the farm is haunted. There are stories of strange lights moving around at night, sounds of horses and distant gunshots, and cries that seem to come from the past. People working or visiting the farm have talked about lights turning on by themselves, seeing shadows where no one is standing, and feeling like someone is watching them. Some even say that at dawn you can hear whispers and the sounds of restless horses, but no one has ever found where these sounds come from. Today, the Jesse James Farm and Museum is a place where you can learn all about the complex stories of Jesse and his family. It invites those curious about its haunted past to come and maybe even experience some of these unexplained mysteries themselves. The Going Snake Massacre. In Tahlequah, Oklahoma, within the Cherokee Nation's lands, there was a significant event known as the Cherokee Courtroom Shootout, also called the Going Snake Massacre or Proctor Beck Fight. This happened on April 15, 1872, and it was more than just a fight. It showed the deep issues and disputes between the Cherokee government and the U.S. government's power. The trouble started with Ezekiel Zeke Proctor, a Cherokee, after a disagreement involving the family of Jim Kesterson and Polly Beck, who was also Cherokee. The situation turned tragic, leading to Polly's death and Jim's injury. This event brought up old conflicts and questions of loyalty and identity within the Cherokee people, made even more complex by the Civil War's after effects. A big part of the problem was who had the right to enforce laws in the Indian Territory. This area, under tribal control, often clashed with federal agents, like U.S. Marshals. Zeke Proctor, known for his Civil War service and support for Cherokee traditions through the Keetoowah Society, was in the middle of this clash. Polly Beck's background, connected to the Confederate supporting Beck family and her marriage outside the tribe, made her a central figure in the debate over the Cherokee's future. Proctor's involvement led to a critical incident that changed many lives forever. The trial was supposed to bring justice, but instead, the courtroom turned into a scene of conflict when a federal team arrived, aiming to enforce U.S. law. The confrontation led to the loss of several lives, including a deputy U.S. Marshal and members of the team, leaving a community in grief. Proctor's clearing of charges by the Cherokee court after such an event highlighted the ongoing struggle between tribal authority and federal government control. Belle was murdered in Oklahoma. In Texas, there's a story about Belle's star, a woman who became famous for her connections with some of the most well-known outlaws of her time. Around 1866, Belle's life changed dramatically when she met Cole Younger, a key figure in the James Younger gang, known for their bold robberies. Rumors flew that Younger was the father of Belle's daughter, Pearl, though Jim Reed, another outlaw, was also in the picture. Belle didn't let gossip stop her. She married Reed in 1866, diving into a life filled with crimes. By 1869, Belle was known for riding boldly with Reed, involved in stealing cattle, horses, and money around Dallas, which earned her the title of Bandit Queen. After Reed's betrayal led to his end in 1874, Belle found herself wandering to the wilds of the Oklahoma Indian Territory. There, she led a group of outlaws and eventually partnered with Sam Starr, a Cherokee outlaw in both romance and crime. Their run from the law paused in 1883 when they were caught for horse theft and spent some time in Detroit's prison, only to pick up where they left off after getting out. Sam Starr's life ended in a gunfight in 1886, marking the end of one chapter of Belle's life and the start of another with Jim July, a Creek Indian outlaw, despite their age difference. This partnership was brief, as Belle's life was mysteriously cut short in 1889, leaving many to speculate about the cause, with hints of a deadly feud, yet no one ever confirmed who was responsible. Ghosts of Tombstone. Tombstone, Arizona, really brings the Wild West back to life, with its old streets still echoing stories from a time filled with showdowns and mysterious figures. Marshal Fred White, the town's first lawman, is rumored to still be around, especially near the spot where he met his untimely end in 1880 after a bad run-in with Curly Bill Brocius. People say White's ghost hangs around the Birdcage Theater, a place that popped up not too long after he left this world. The town also has stories about a shadowy figure dressed in black, spotted where Virgil Earp was ambushed, forever trying to make a crossing he never can, maybe Earp himself. Then there's a lady in white, roaming around, her tale twisted with either sorrow from losing a child to illness or the anger of a woman wronged. You can feel the presence of those who didn't survive a big fire in the early 1880s, with hints of smoke or glimpses of figures marked by the fire. The famous OK Corral still holds the tension of the face-off between the cowboys and the Earps, like it's locked in time. Over at Boot Hill Graveyard, where many of Tombstone's first residents are buried, there are all kinds of unexplained happenings, lights where there shouldn't be any, sounds with no source, and even Billy Clanton seems to be reaching out from beyond. The Birdcage Theater is a hotspot for ghost hunters, said to have 31 spirits within its walls. Once the center of Tombstone's social life, it's now a museum where the past seems to mix with the present. Then there's Nellie Cashman's restaurant, Schieffelin Hall, and Big Nose Kate's Saloon, plus the Buford House, each with their own spooky stories. Haunted Bullock Hotel. Back in 1876, Seth Bullock and Soul Star hit Deadwood, South Dakota, with big plans beyond just selling hardware. They rolled in with a wagon full of tools and dreams, picking out a corner lot that would become the heart of their success, a hardware store that quickly became the go-to spot for miners and settlers. Bullock, who had been a lawman in Montana, ended up taking charge of keeping the peace in Deadwood after Wild Bill Hickok passed away. He was tall and determined, and he managed to bring a bit of order to a place known for its wild ways. Thanks to him, Deadwood started to change from a chaotic mining camp into a town where people could actually settle down. Even when fires hit their business not once but twice, Bullock and Starr didn't give up. Instead, they saw it as a chance to build Deadwood's first fancy hotel. The Bullock Hotel was all about luxury, standing out in a town that was mostly rough around the edges. People came from all over to stay there, drawn by its fancy look and feel. Even after Bullock passed away in 1919, it seemed like he never really left Deadwood. There are stories about his spirit still hanging around the hotel, making sure everything's up to his standards. Guests and workers at the hotel have noticed weird things happening, like stuff moving on its own or strange noises, that make them think Bullock is still keeping an eye on the place. Today, the Bullock Hotel is one of Deadwood's treasures, attracting visitors with its rich history and maybe even the chance to feel the presence of Seth Bullock himself. The Train of Marshall Pass. After the railroad made its way through Marshall Pass in Colorado, reaching up to an impressive 12,000 feet, an experienced engineer named Nelson Edwards was given the job of guiding the train through this challenging stretch. Edwards, who had been doing this job without any issues for months, suddenly felt uneasy one evening. He had heard about a problem with the tracks and a bridge that wasn't in good shape, which made him worry as he started his trip that night. Right after the train left a snow-covered shelter, Edwards heard a strange whistle sound in the distance and a gong from his own train that he didn't cause. This made him stop the train, confused. The conductor checked, but found no reason for the stop. Feeling a strong need to move aside for another train that was supposed to come through, Edwards got the train moving again, feeling more and more worried. He thought he heard more whistles and even saw what looked like another train coming up behind them, pushing him to make the train go faster, dodging known dangers while passengers held on tight, hoping they'd make it through safely. As they went down the other side of the summit, letting gravity speed them up, Edwards saw the other train getting closer, its bigger wheels visible in the night and a figure signaling for help. The chase went on, narrowly avoiding a collapse at a shaky bridge and a crucial rail switch, thanks to Edwards' quick actions. Then, suddenly, facing a red stop signal and the threat of a crash, the ghostly train chasing them seemed to derail and disappear into the night, leaving no trace but the wind. With that intense moment behind them, and after safely reaching Green River on time, Edwards was met with a scary message left on his cab window, a warning about the danger he had just avoided and advice to leave this haunted route. The next day, Edwards decided to work for the Union Pacific instead, leaving the mystery of the Phantom Train and its terrifying pursuit as a spooky story of Marshall Pass. Servant Girl Annihilator. From late 1884 to the night before Christmas in 1885, Austin, Texas, a city on the rise with about 15,000 people, was gripped by a deep fear and a mystery that was darker than the night. Even as the city was growing, with the state capital being built and railroads connecting it to the wider world, there was a shadow lurking. Austin had become the hunting ground for a very dangerous person. The terror started with Molly Smith, a cook, who was attacked in her sleep, stabbed, and dragged outside, where she was struck the final time. This was the start of a series of terrible events that saw many African American women, a young girl, and even a man fall victim to this attacker. The city was filled with fear, not just because of the murders, but because of how violent each attack was. Axes, Knives and other sharp objects were used with such rage, it seemed like it would never end. The famous writer O. Henry, who lived in Austin at the time, called the murderer the servant girl Annihilator, a name that captured the horror that had taken over the city. By the end of 1885, the attacks had also terrified the white community with the murder of 2 women on Christmas Eve. The city was desperate, and the police couldn't find the murderer. Arresting the husbands of the victims didn't help calm anyone's fear or answer any questions. People still talk about what happened to the Annihilator. Some think he might have gone on to become the notorious Jack the Ripper in London. Others talk about a young man with a missing toe, which matched a clue from one of the crime scenes, who was killed in a fight, possibly taking the secret of the Annihilator's identity with him. Just as suddenly as they started, the murders stopped, leaving behind many unanswered questions and the chilling thought of America's first serial killer. And with that, we've reached the end of our thrilling ride through the lawless and untamed Wild Wild West. I'm eager to hear your reactions to these harrowing tales. Drop your thoughts below on these spine-chilling events, and let's get a conversation started about the wild, wild past.